All right, how's everybody doing tonight? Okay, so it's week 3 of Web225. A few announcements before we get started. You might have seen the Ozo bot up here as you were signing in. This little guy here, or gal, whatever you want to call it. It's got lights in the bottom of the robot. That's what causes it to run. It's got a full processor in it. It's a 1-inch cubic inch. And we're going to be having a workshop this Saturday, and I'll go ahead and pass out some information on it. Are you going to sit right here?
Yep.
Okay. And we've still got a few seats left. Students do get $20 off, which is, it ends up being $65, but you get the robot and a binder with lessons. It's 2 hours from 10 to 12 this Saturday in this room. I think I've got five seats left, something like that. And they will sell out, so give you guys first bids here. Won't work, it's a lot of fun. You have little brothers or sisters or nieces, nephews, son or daughter. I don't know if we have any grandparents in here besides me, but any other grandparents in here? Soon to be, okay. So I even got my grandson. I'll show you a video of him in just a second. But it's a lot of fun. I mean, that's the robot busted out right there. That's what it looks like. Let's see if I can blow it up here a little bit. So a lot of stuff in that little robot, a lot of content. It's got a polycarbonate shell, micro USB, that's to charge it up, LiPo battery. Battery actually lasts about a couple hours. Circuit board, just like on your computer. Optical sensor on the front of it. Color sensor on the bottom to determine the lines it's on. When you're up here looking at it, you might have noticed it turned colors when it gets a certain line, and that's designed that way. Friction train, drivetrain. It's got 4 wheels in it, and another polycarbonate bottom. And so, cool little robot packed into a little pretty tight space. But if you're interested in coding, or you're interested in robots, or you know someone that is, it will probably be the last time we offer it this semester. It'll be offered again in the summer. I'm going to do 2 or 3 in the summer. It usually always goes. It'll go then for sure, no problem. They've all sold out, by the way, every one of them. Human nature is, though, people don't buy the tickets till a week of or 2 weeks before. So, but it always sells out. So, they do have a new model of this one called the Evo that actually has built-in social media and camera to where it'll actually go around and take photos and post it on social media, which I think maybe be kind of scary to do, but anyway, that's just me. But one of the other cool things you can do with this robot is you can code it. You say, well, how do you learn coding with it? Bless you. You can use drag and drop coding, and what happens is basically, I'll show you the screen. It's pretty simple what it looks like. There's a couple levels that they do before they actually use a robot. And so it's this type of screen here where basically you tell it what to do, where to go, things of that nature. And then this load bit, just like the picture says, you put the robot in a certain section of the screen, which would be down here, hit load, and this code I just dragged and dropped in here would now show up in the robot, and then I can double tap on the robot's power button, and it does the code that I just put in instead of just following lines only. And so that's OzoBot and OzoBlockly. If you are interested, the handout's in front of you. You can register at myrbc.org. If you can't afford it, but you still want to go and you're seriously interested in coding, let me know. I want to make sure you get one. And there are a few seats left, and if you can't afford it, but you are serious about learning on coding, see me before you leave, and I'll reserve one for you, and I'll take it off the website so nobody can buy that ticket. Sound good? Questions on that? Okay, the next one is the hour of code. Well, let me show you my grandson. I told you I'd show him. Here's Jaden. He's 7 years old. And this was the one in December that we did. Ooh, sweet, super small though. So he just got through coding it on the screen, and he now running on lines in the code he made. Because some of the lines you do, it can actually go, some of the guys saw it up here, it goes pretty fast. And what's funny about it, when it goes really fast, you can actually hear the engine rev up. It goes, it's kind of cute. But he spent about 30 minutes making that, so I was pretty proud of him. Well, I'm kind of biased. He's pretty sharp, though. He's a pretty sharp little kid. Awesome. All right. So, tons of stuff on Ozobot. So, the next handout I'm going to give you is this one right here. If anybody heard of that RBC downtown location? Well, I've not actually been to I've been to our, it's in the RSR building. I've not been to our new room. So we have a whole, I think it's a second floor is what we got, if I'm not mistaken. We do have classes down there. So the president thought it'd be kind of cool, the new president, to offer the hour of code this semester in the RBC downtown location. Doug is pretty cool. He actually came to the robot event in December and my hour of code in November. And he has a programming background. He actually did coding in college way back when. And so this one is it's on the same line as the coding with robots, except it's totally free. You do drag and drop coding. I put a quote from Marissa Mayer, the CEO of Yahoo. And yes, I purposely put a woman on there because we do need more girl programmers, more women in programming. And so I think the stats are something like in college, it's better than it used to be. It used to be 1 out of every 4 computer science was women. Now it's 2 out of 4. And so it's getting better. But I'd like to see it even eventually. And I think it's going to get there because of people like her that basically work their way up the ladder. And so she says, I always did something I was not ready to do. I think that's how we grow. I think that's a perfect quote for anybody learning about coding. You're not sure about it. You don't know if you can do it. You can. All right. If you like to solve problems and puzzles and you love to figure stuff out, and I was talking to somebody earlier before class, if you like to create something from nothing to solve a problem, you'll more than likely like coding, whether it be apps, which I teach here, websites, which we also teach, whatever it might be. And so developing things in code is a creation of your own. And so the hour of code is going to be the RBC downtown location, the first Wednesday of the month, 5 to 6 p.m. I always do a giveaway, and I'm very predictable. So every giveaway is the same every time I've offered since December 2015. It's a selfie stick is one giveaway. And then the other giveaway is a mobile phone charger or mobile device, which everybody loves both, right? You can always use an extra charger of some type, right, when your battery dies. And so those are always good. And we do it randomly. We do a little app. It's funny, the app we used to do the drawing, it's created, the name was actually created by a developer, which sometimes we aren't too creative in names. The name of the app was just called Random. That's it. Couldn't think of a better name for it. But it's a good app. You just put in the number of people, hit random, and it gives you a number one to whatever. And so if you are interested, this one is free, and you can register for all of them, the February, March, April, and May. And I would recommend registering for all of them because I looked at it earlier tonight thinking, well, we probably don't have many the first week. It's already 3/4 way full. And I haven't even started really pushing it out on social media. So there's posters out, and I think we have it on the TVs here and on our website. But we are going to be pushing it through WIFR. When that happens, I know it'll sell out pretty quick. I want to go just to this location just because of the location. I think it'd be pretty cool. We're going to be doing it in the Mac Lab, a new Mac Lab. So they're actually newer Macs than these. And I don't know for sure, but I heard that the location that we'll be at will be near a window, so it'll be overlooking the Rock River. So that'd be pretty nice. And so if you are interested, again, the age range is my grandson Jaden's at 7. He's been to all of them, like 12 of them. And then we've had even kids younger than that, like 5 years old, go to these, all the way up to 86. It's drag and drop coding, like I showed you earlier on the overhead. The behind the code for the drag and drop is JavaScript. So if you've heard of JavaScript or maybe interested in JavaScript, you can kind of, what's cool about the code we use, the drag and drop code we use, which was created by MIT, is you can flip it, meaning you can view it either the blocks of code, the visual blocks, like I showed you on the overhead earlier, or you can view just the code if you were to have just written the code, what it looks like. And code in and of itself, when you're first starting, and even when you're not first starting, it's boring just looking at code. Code is just code. It's just text is all it is. It does nothing by viewing it. The Blockly concept is teaching people coding logic before we get into coding syntax and what code, how you type stuff in to get stuff to do stuff, to get programs to do stuff. Make sense? So you're not getting bogged down in how do I type this in to get this program to work. You're basically learning with Blockly coding, top-down programming. When an app starts, what happens? Maybe speeds up, maybe the speed 5 and turns green, and you can turn left and right and go straight, and that's about it. So stuff like that. So I encourage you to go to these or give the handout to somebody that you know. And did I give you the hour code one? Okay, cool. And so I think I gave both of them out, so they should have both. I have extras up here too, by the way, if you are interested. Questions on either one? Okay, let me close out those tabs. And again, MyRVC hour of code, myrvc.org is where you can register, which is the next thing I'm going to go to anyway. Since week 1, we've had 6 job postings on our website, which I'm pretty excited about. If you have already had me as a teacher, you know one of my passions besides teaching and my grandkids and my wife and my family is getting people connected to jobs. And so we've had 6 postings since week 1, job postings. And if you go to myrvc.org, I definitely recommend you to follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook, or even have a weekly 2 or 3 times we put Snapchat stories together of events coming up. I know some of you are on Snapchat. In fact, I know you are because 90% of millennials use Snapchat more than any other social media. And so more than likely we've got a few, any Snapchat users in here? Okay, I got 1 or 2 of you. All right, so again, we just create stories and you can share those with your other friends and things, pretty easy. So when you go to myrvc.org, if you click on My Future, there's a list of companies that have posted. If it says in the title filled or position filled, it's been filled. So we have so far Entree is hiring a web developer and a PC tech both. Entree is an awesome company. The CEO, Mike Brodsky, came to our RVC Tech Expo last semester. Here's a story about Mike. Every time Mike posts for jobs, if I was to call him right now and say, what type of contact do you want me to give the students to let you know they're interested? I'll just give him my cell number. That's how he's a CEO, basically. And so travels all over the world and takes time to hire our students. He hires at least 6 students a semester, and in all types of IT type stuff, from help desk to answering phones to building PCs to networking, programming. And so resume.entrerock is the website to send your resume. And web developer and PC tech, and these are any jobs you see on myrvc.org are entry level, meaning little or no experience. You might be actually just taking your very first class this semester in web, or your very first class this semester in networking or programming or whatever. That's good enough. Don't wait until you're done with school to start getting involved. Do it now. And they do pay well too, which is awesome. Years ago when I first started in internships, companies wouldn't pay students. And you do get a credit, 1 credit for every 75 hours you work, which is good. but they generally didn't pay students. Now every company pays students because liability purposes, and you have to go through the same rigmarole as any other employee to get in the door anyway. So they figure, why not just pay them, and we'll work around their school schedule. The average hours most interns work is 10 to 20 hours a week, and they work around all of your whatever you have responsibility-wise. So entree 2 positions. The next one is another good company, Savant. They were also at the RBC Tech Expo. This is a tech intern, reports to managing information technology, manager of information technology, and a whole bunch of little bitty stuff you'll be doing. Basically, all things IT, from help desk to installing PCs to printers to any other task assigned. I did put the email at the bottom of this as well. Lori Rice at Savant Capital, I just emailed her today. She hasn't heard from any student yet, so it's a really good job, and she will work around. They will work around your school schedule, and so I'd say go for it if you need some money to work while you're going to college, which I already know you do because you're going to college, and so I've been there. And so it's nice to have companies that kind of work with our students and are a really good company to get started. Some jobs, I know I could probably ask some of you, you might have had some horror story jobs. Anybody had any horror story jobs before that you walked in and like, what did I walk into with this job? These jobs that we post are good jobs. They're good experience for the first job if it's your very first job, or if it's your 20th job, it's a really good tech experience, I believe. And you'll learn a lot. One of the students that went through our division 3 years ago, Natalie, or Natalia, she's Russian, graduated from our college. She was in all of my courses, took a whole bunch of Cisco courses, graduated with, I think, a computer science and a Cisco degree both. Anyway, she lives in Texas now, working for a Dell subsidiary that does network security and web programming, and she travels all over the world. And she started here at Rock Valley, working for a company called Lions here in town, which is a developer marketing firm. They start out their interns, and we'll generally have 1 or 2 this semester. They'll want $15, $20 an hour is what they start paying for interns, which is awesome for an intern. And what's great about it is she learned so much stuff there that they sent her to trainings in Chicago. They sent her for certifications, pay for that, and she still has learned a lot here at the campus, but also learned even more as far as building upon what she learned here on campus at a job. And so I can't encourage you guys enough to get involved in an internship, volunteer, whatever, outside of your curriculum. I know you're really busy, but it's going to really be beneficial to you. And when you leave school, you'll have just a whole wealth of experience to bring with you besides just a degree or certificate. So, questions on anything I've mentioned so far? So the RBCR code, the Learn Coding with Robots this weekend, and the website with jobs. If you have an Android or iOS, we do have an app as well for both on the website you can download, which we keep updated. And we also have a College Memory Maze app for iOS only. But if you do have a smartphone, iOS or Android, I do recommend the app because we just make it look a lot nicer for mobile devices. Like you have a little page just for all the jobs and news and stuff like that. Okay. This week we're going to talk about contrast, week 3. And you might have noticed a little robot up here on the table when you came in. We're doing something this semester with the robot. It's called Dester 2. And I gave an announcement, which I'll let you read on your own after class. But it has a schedule of all my other classes that Dester will be in. And what I'm wanting you to do or ask you to do is if you can take 5 or 10 minutes out of your time in the evening on Tuesday or Monday or Thursday for you guys and remote into Dester during the times I give on our website, and it's in that announcement. It's basically just like connecting to FaceTime, but when you log in, you'll actually see the classroom and be able to control this guy right here. Be able to move the robot around. It can go up or down. side to side, all the way around, and be able to see the overhead. And what the reason this has been used, or the way this has been used up to this point on campus, is for folks with disabilities. I had a student last semester that used it who was homebound. They used it in a psychology and sociology class. We sat at the front of the room. I started it up, and I had a student worker pick it up at the end of the hour. But the student was able to watch the faculty in the session, ask questions, and it worked great. We're wanting to try out something a little different this semester to see how it works. We're wanting to use it to also be able for other faculty on campus to use it when students are sick or injured, or you have to go away for work, but you can't miss the in-class stuff. Also, if students are interested in kind of auditing a course for a little bit to see what it's like, using it like that. And so that's why I'm wanting you guys to connect to the robot to see what you think. And I'll ask you for feedback. I'll put a little form on the website. And so in the Connect to Dester, Robot Dester on our website gives the information on how to connect to Dester, what times are available, and that little PDF on how to connect along with the FAQ. And I'll also put a link in there for a form to fill out if you do connect to Dester anytime this semester, to give me a feedback on what you think of it. Okay, so this week is settings and contrast, week 3. We talked last week on the three-legged stool of basically around exposure on ISO and aperture and the shutter speed. And this week we're going to talk about the need for exposure and the rule of thirds a little bit more. So in 3 notes there, it brings up this slide here, and we're going to talk about that. So exposure, we talked a little bit last week how light is good. It's a good thing as far as the number one thing you need for good photos. Good exposure is the amount of light exposed to the film or image sensor. In our case, for what we're teaching, it's your image sensor, but when I started learning, it was film. Controlled by film speed or image sensor sensitivity, shutter speed, and aperture is what exposure is controlled by. The amount of exposure is dependent upon the sensitivity of the sensor in our case. And remember, we talked about last week that what really sets apart cameras isn't the megapixels, but the quality of the digital sensor. That's what really makes or breaks the quality of an image. When I was going through college, I was a graphic designer, and I worked in a building that actually had a print press. Then when we got through doing the layouts, we actually took the layouts down to the print press. They would lay the designs on the print press template, and you could actually see the rolls of color, the 4 rolls of color, go over the print press to make the layout for the books or magazines. And exposure was real important, because what looked good on my monitor before it went to film sometimes is totally different. Okay. And so, and I think we talked about that last week, how even when you take photos and you bring them home and you look at them on your monitor or your phone or tablet, you're like, oh, wow, this looks awesome. And then when you print it out, oh, this looks terrible. It's really dark and grainy and granularly. And exposure is what causes that. So if you have, like, for instance, we talked about last week, the f-stop. You say you have an ISO set at 100, which is kind of a low end. And remember, ISO is what controls, it fakes out the light in the camera on the sensor. And so if the ISO at 100 is pretty low, and the f-stop is 2.8, and then the shutter speed is set at different durations. So 1.3, 2.5, 4 seconds, 8 seconds, 15 seconds. This is actually how long the shutter is left open. And as you can see, the longer it's left open, the lighter the exposure. Okay, because the more light is let in to that shot. So proper exposure can make or break a photo. Exposure can change the experience of a photo and the appearance of a photo. So example here, we've got in your cameras, most of your cameras have what's called an exposure setting, or we'll go over this semester, called an EV value. E is in every, V is in Valentine. EV value with like a -1, +1. You usually go down to like a -5 all the way to like a +10. 0 would be as it is, as the camera sees it anyway, as it is, which in this case you'll notice it's pretty, not too bad, but not great, not real bright. So if you did a -1 EV, you'll notice how it makes it darker. +1 EV does make it lighter, but it actually does weird things with the dark shadows. It kind of like washes out the shadows, which sometimes, to have a good photo, you need to have shadows as well. You're gonna have shadows. So EV does that. So as you can see here, depending upon the exposure value of the camera at the time of the photo, depends upon the outcome. In fact, on the bottom one here, the +1, you don't even see the sun. I mean, as far as the make of the sun through the clouds here, like you do here, a little bit here, nothing here. It's all just kind of the same kind of blah kind of light. And that's where histograms come in. And we're going to talk more about this semester over and over again, histograms. You'll get a feel for it now. So histograms basically is probably one of the most important parts of the camera. And you'll see here a visual of a histogram on a photo. It starts on the left, kind of low and jaggedy, goes up to peaks, and then back down. And what you'll learn this semester, and we'll talk more and more about it, is the histogram you want to have is kind of like this, where it starts out this way, kind of goes up, and then back down. For the bulk of the dark black is in the middle and a real smooth incline going up and going down, kind of like a little hill. That's really one of the best histograms. But a histogram will give you a relative amount of light and darkness that's in the picture. And it basically gives a good feel for, what a photo is going to look like before you ever print it out, before you look at it on the LCD. You can, when you start reading a histogram and knowing what it means, it helps a lot as far as the quality of the photo. So the way it works is this. Each square represents a pixel of brightness. We learned about that. The histogram displays every single pixel collected. 0 on the left here that I'm hovering on the overhead with is black, pure black. 255 is pure white, okay? In between here, they have what's called the tonal range of the photo. And then shadows on the left column, middle column is midtones, right column is highlights. And that's how a histogram is broke up. So you'll notice most of the stuff on this photo is all in the mid-tone region, the tonal region, not much highlights at all. So again, I can just tell by looking at it, it's got good light, but it's pretty flat. There's no real variations. It'd be kind of like the one we looked at earlier, the +1. Okay, good, pretty good light, but it washed out the sun, the details of the sun. It washed out the details of the shadows, and that's kind of what this one would look like. That's what the histogram would look like. So tonal range, though, is the most important, where most pixels are found, which that's normal, and it should be normal on your photos. You'll learn this semester that you can have histograms with everything over here on the left or on the right, and that's not good. You want most stuff in the middle. Most of the black you want in the middle in the tonal range. So to analyze your picture well, by looking at a histogram, and again, there's no perfect histogram, but you can kind of get a feel for it. Broad total ranges and few midtones and plenty highlights and shadows in this one here. So notice here, pretty heavy on the left, which is the shadows. Highlights has a little bit too. Not really much in the tonal range on this one. And the arrows are pointing to where it's finding the midtones, which is actually this one and this one. So this part of the picture. So this part of the picture actually where my mouse is right now, right here, do you think this is getting too much light or not enough light right here? What do you think? There's no wrong answer. What do you think? Too much, yeah. It's kind of just, it's hard to see. Maybe it's fog, it looks like. I don't know. But, it's a kind of whitewash. You really can't see any details. Over here on the left would be this part here, would be the rock formation. Pretty good light. You can make out a little bit of detail here at the peaks here. Over this ridge here, not so much. And then over here on the right, the shadow part of the histogram, again, I'm guessing because of the fog, it's kind of bringing kind of a iffy kind of light and detail. So here's an average histogram like I talked about a few slides back. Notice how it has a pretty good ascension, and descension. All right. And again, it's not going to be perfectly smooth ever, but this is kind of what you want one to look like. It's an average, good quality light and exposure. Plenty of midtones, plenty of highlights. Ideal subject because the camera can get most of the tones in the middle here, and most camera meters have no problem reading it. What that means is some of your cameras will not take a picture, won't let you take a picture in auto mode until your histogram looks like this. You don't know that yet. You don't now, but that's why it wouldn't let you take the picture. You're just sitting there blinking red or blinking green, saying not enough light, not enough light, not enough light. And then you finally get enough light, or you turn the flash on, then it lets you take it, right? That's what it's looking for, is digitizing, looking at seeing at that diagram. Because a camera can't see images, but a camera can read a histogram like this just fine. And that's what your digital camera is using, by the way. It's using that histogram to determine the quality of that picture before you take it. Now, by the way, you can, on some of your cameras, override that in manual mode, which you'll learn how to do that this semester if your camera has manual mode. But if you're using auto like you did last week, it literally won't tell you take a photo until your histogram looks like this. All right? It won't let you do it. Has the pretty good lighting. Now let's look at some weird and wacky histograms, I like to call. Weird and wacky. It sounds almost like America's Funny Videos or something. I don't know. So on the left here, we have a high key histogram. And I like to remember this one like high tide. Okay. I had friends of mine. I never did this. Maybe some of you have or no friends. He was a surfer going through college. Anybody have any surfer friends? Anybody know anybody that's surfing? He had the, dude, and, he was always talking, his blonde hair, and always went out. Really smart person. But by talking to him, you think he was pretty stupid, right? But he was very smart. But he liked to go out and go surfing, and high tide was what they liked to do. So high key is basically this right here. Picture of a Dalmatian on a beach. Just looking at it, you're like, not too bad a picture. But notice it's really, really heavily on the right of the photo, or right of the histogram. And that's going to be a really whitewashed kind of photo. It's almost like you take the color white, put it over the photo, and almost make it all the way 100% opacity to where it's almost like all white almost. The right is the exact opposite. This picture here. It's a room with a metal gate, light showing in the gate, very low key. Okay, again, very dark, not much light in this whatsoever. And if I would go back up here real quick to show you the histogram thing, a lot of shadows in that one, not much highlights and midtones. The first one we looked at was a lot of highlights. This one, a lot of shadows. So a lot of shadows on this one, not many midtones or highlights. So the left one is what's called underexposed of the weird and wacky. The right one is overexposed. So underexposed or underexposed, meaning just like it sounds, you've got not enough lighting to even make any real detail whatsoever in the photo. You can see the dog pretty good, I think, but everything else, you look at it long enough, you can tell he's on the beach and things. On the right side, though, they have what's called clipped highlights, meaning if you, those of you taking graphics, you played in Photoshop, this one here on the right, the left one you can maybe play around with a little bit in Photoshop in the levels and make it a little better and maybe salvage it. The right one, though, if you have clipped highlights like this, and it's actually what it is these bars, the shadow of the bars here, you can't really fix that in post-production. You could add in your own lines and stuff probably, but, you know, which photographers do, but it's pretty beyond repair basically naturally just with photography photo settings like Photoshop or like we'll use Pixlr this semester. Also on the left, I'll mention, notice here on the right, at least everything's filled up pretty much. What I mean by that, from the left to right, you'll notice there's some black peaks, sometimes low, but at least there's content all throughout the histogram on the right. On the left, you'll notice here, no content whatsoever. It's totally white space. Totally wasted space. And it is referring to, by the way, you can imagine, in direct correlation to what I'm circling on the overhead here is what it's referring to right here. Next is a blow up of the clipped highlights I showed you just a second ago. The clipped highlights, the top one basically is a normal histogram, and you'll notice you can make out the shadow here of the bars and the ornament metal pretty good here. But notice here, it's totally clipped and near impossible to make out. It's just really bright light. Now let's go to contrast. Contrast is basically the measure. We just talked about exposure. Now contrast is a measure of the difference between the brightness between the dark and light areas in a scene. So here's a photos of water, okay, of a lake, we'll say, or an ocean. Low contrast, everything's kind of blah and blurred over, no detail. High contrast, more detail, but it's really spiky and it's really clippy, all right? You can see it. You can actually see the difference here. It's almost like you took a sponge and just blotted here. It looked pretty good, then you just blotted a few areas. That's a high contrast too. Low contrast, like taking a squeegee over something and just smearing it. Just, you know, it's kind of yucky kind of look, feel. And it makes you feel yucky when you look at it, kind of like blah, kind of, that's what low contrast will do. So images that tend to be flat or dull or like you call blah is taken during a fog. Makes sense here. And this is kind of what the histogram will look like. Not Instagram. Well, Instagram too. If you took an Instagram photo, that's what it would look like. Okay. But histogram is what it will look like, low contrast. High contrast pictures tend to be like more intense, choppy than the low contrast, and a lot of light. And that's what it looks like here. The histogram will look like that. You'll notice on both, though, on both the mid and high tones, on the high tones and the shadows, highlights and shadows, nothing hardly in either one, but a lot in the middle. In fact, on the low contrast, it's more like a rectangular column. On the right, it's more like a choppy hill with nothing on the left or right, no real ascension or descension. So here we have an example of, it's actually one picture broken up into 3 histograms, which you generally wouldn't see in a photo and a camera, but this kind of breaks it down. The top part, if you were just to take a picture of that only, is this what the histogram would look like. The middle, which would be just the water part here of the shadow of the building, excuse me, is what it would look like. And then the bottom here is what it would look like. So if you put all 3 together, the top, middle, and bottom, it would make a normal histogram. This one right here, an average histogram, okay? So let's look at some examples here, and I'll get some feedback from you. So in this photo here, what do you think it has the most? And only just give a reminder, on the left, we'll split it up into 3s here. The middle is tonal, the right is highlights, the left is shadows. So does this one have more shadows? How many thinks this has more shadows? The left stuff. How many thinks it has more middle tonal region? How many think it has more highlights? Okay.
I think it's in the middle between shadows and.
I think it is. I think it could be both. Yeah, you're both the first two, which would be the shadows and the tonal region both, because it is pretty good lighting. It does have not a lot of highlights in it, meaning you're going to lose some detail. And it's not a bad photo at all, but it could probably use a little bit more light. And the reason for this photo being this way is, I'm guessing the sun is right over in this area here, past the photo range here. So you're losing some light because of that. And you're in the shadow of a hill, it looks like on this one. So not a bad photo, but it's just what the histogram would look like. Here, what are we looking at? What range are we looking at on this one?
Definitely mid.
Yeah, your mid-range, your tonal range is what this one's mostly. And it has a little bit on the left of the shadows there on the left. No highlights whatsoever, pretty much. It's pretty much flat line there. And it makes sense because it's an over-the-top shot of an insect, right? And so you're literally focusing in only on the object. You're really isolating it, and it's pretty close to the lens, it looks like. So you're gonna get some shadows because of that. You're gonna get good tonal because of that, but not much highlights. Again, not a bad thing, but just the way it is on this one. It's not a bad histogram. So Goldilocks and the three histograms. So too underexposed would be what it looks like here. Again, peaking to the left, too many shadows, too dark, underexposed. Too light, too much light, overexposed. I kind of give it the the vampire effect is what that one is. Kind of whitewashes everything. Then the middle would be just right, where you have kind of a slow descension or ascension up top of the hill to descension to the bottom. So underexposed, left, top left, overexposed, bottom left, too much light, and then to the right, just right, with pretty much a good balance of everything coming up from the left, from your shadows to your midtones or tonal region to the right, which would be your highlight region. Here, let's look at what's wrong with this one here. And again, for artistic purposes, it might be something a photographer wants end result, but I'm going to try to blow this one up a little bit. So we have in this one, let me ask you what you think it is. Is this underexposed or overexposed? How many think this is underexposed? Underexposed or overexposed? Yeah, be more underexposed than overexposed. Remember, if it's underexposed, your histogram leans more to the left, which just has a lot on the left. It does have some here in the midtones, not quite in the highlight region, by the way. And the midtones, by the way, for this one, comes right in this area here where my mouse is where it comes from right there, the midtones region. Everything else is pretty much whitewashed there. Next one, a lot of light here at the top, a little here, and then a little bit more detail here. So the way the histogram reads this one, it has some shadows here, not much mid-tone whatsoever, not much tonal region whatsoever. And at the very, very, very right, it has a peak. So if we know it's to the right and it's peaking, is it going to be overexposed or underexposed? Overexposed. Makes sense, right? And the overexposure really isn't right here where the trees are. It's actually right here above the trees. It's where it's all overexposed. So part of the pictures are okay, but the whole picture in general we consider to be overexposed. Now here's an interesting one. It kind of gives kind of like a negative effect, a film negative effect from the old days kind of. And I think some of your cameras have this filter maybe on it, the digital filter called negative effect, where it kind of makes it reverses things in your photo to make light. If it's light, it's dark. If it's dark, it's light. This one actually, well, I think it looks pretty cool, really, because it kind of really highlights the clouds here really sharply. And reason why it does that is this right here. It's overexposed. Remember the clipping thing earlier with the bars on the shadows? That's what's happening here. These clouds are being clipped, which really it makes it kind of look cool, I think. It makes it kind of you don't really have to do much to it. If you're looking for like an artistic effect, it looks pretty cool. Now, if you're looking for a normal photo, no, it doesn't. It's overexposed and clipped for sure. A lot of highlights. But it also has in this one, a lot of shadows as well, but not as much as the overexposed. So I would say this is more overexposed to the point of clipping on that one. This one, underexposed, overexposed. I mean, it's underexposed. There you go. And again, no brainer there. Most of the photo is totally black. Okay. You do have some good stuff here, which by the way, the good stuff here with the good lighting and good, clouds in the sky is right here. That's what's making it up right here. Very little bit. And you'll notice in the histogram, it kind of it makes it, when you're looking at it, it's kind of like if you took the real image and flipped it upside down. And that's kind of what it, because by the way, that's what a camera lens does when it takes your photo. It kind of flips it. Even though you don't see it, it does. And so, underexposed on that one. Now this one's kind of cool. So this kind of reminds me of like anybody remember watching the movie E.T., the first original one? This kind of reminds me of when he's coming over the mountain, right, with a bike. And you guys got traveling on the bike and E.T.'s on the handlebars, I think. It's kind of what this reminds me of. But definitely, majorly underexposed. And it looks, if you're looking on the monitor, it looks better than this one, but it's kind of a blue background on the monitor. But you can see the moon. Everything else, can't really make much of it. This one here, middle of winter, which we've seen this before. Snow just came down out in the middle of a pasture somewhere, some land, and you're taking a picture of a tree, totally snow-ridden, and it's still snowing outside when you're taking the photo. It's kind of a whitewashed effect. But because that's going to be really overexposed, heavy clippings, but again, not a bad photo. It's just the way it is. That's the way it looks right now. And so again, you might like that photo, but it's good to know, what it looks like in the histogram to determine, okay, yeah, I know I'm going to get some highlights on this one. I know it's going to be clipped a little bit, but you might want that. Yes. What is what now? The bars here at the top or at the bottom? Oh, this right here? Yeah, that's actually major clipping. Yeah, just major clipping on that one. It actually has to do with kind of like the clouds earlier. On the edges of the tree here, it actually is kind of an outline. That's why I think it's kind of cool. It actually outlines everything really nice. And what causes the outline here is this clipping here. Is what causes the outline. I think it kind of pops out the tree in midst of the snow. Kind of still keep the structure of the tree a little bit. We've all taken photos like this, right? It's nice. You'll say it's 4th of July. Everybody's, watch the fireworks. You're at the house. You're at some restaurant or whatever, and everybody wants to take photos next to a whatever, and you definitely have flash, full flash. So the person's definitely, you can see the person just fine. Everything behind is totally dark or black. That's what the histogram is going to look like. So you could argue, well, the person's not underexposed, but everything else is behind the person. The person and the object of what the person's holding on here is definitely looks pretty good, but everything behind the person is going to be as underexposed, which would be the people standing here and whatever else is back there that we can't see. Okay, and that's what the histogram is going to look like. And really, there are some settings on your camera you'll learn this semester where you can, use your flash to see more of the people back there. But depending on the darkness of the area, it's still you're only going to get as best you can get. And so they do have what's called backflash or backlighting, to where you can put it on there to make it the shutter speed open a little bit longer, the shutter open a little bit longer to let more light in, to let the people see. to let the light in, to let the photo be more exposed. But because of that, you'd have to have a tripod, which this one I'm guessing wasn't taken with a tripod. But we've all taken pictures like this, right? And what you would do is, you get it home and you would crop it to where you just have this person here, and that's it. That's what you would do. Histogram going on as far as how it works with everything else on your camera, how to maybe adjust it to make it look better, like the average one, the one like this where it comes up a little bit, then goes back down. So here's an example of a shutter speed of 1/180th of a second. I'm going to turn the light off on this next so you can see it. I hear snoring. Okay, so here's a shutter speed of 1/180th of a second. F-stop is 2.8. And the ISO is 50, which is super low, almost non-existent. So this is a river here. On this side, you got some foliage, tree overlooking the river, and some people walking in a park. Again, this part here of the picture looks pretty good lighting, but the trees here is what makes the histogram look like this and makes it underexposed on the total. The total look of the picture will be underexposed. So to fix this one, we could actually bump up the ISO a little bit to maybe 100 or 200, leave everything else alone, and we should be a little better. So here we have shutter speed in this one is 1/60th of a second, so pretty fast. Aperture 2.8, 200. This one, because of the shutter speed and really the aperture and the ISO being 200, it whitewashes it. It's already a pretty bright day, and you'll notice because of that, it's clipping it, and it has some midtones in it, but it's clipping it because of the ISO 200. So I would say on this one, you could fix it by taking the ISO down to 50, the lowest you can go, and imagine the photo would actually look a little bit better. What it would do with these right peaks on the overexposure would get rid of them. It would get rid of them some. You could also make the shutter speed even faster, much faster than that. So here's a shutter speed of 1/160th of a second. It's inside of like a warehouse thing with looks like a carnival type of thing or an apparatus. Don't know what that is exactly. F-stop F8, which the hole's going to be really small on that high f-stop or the high aperture. And then the ISO is 200. ISO is a little higher, but because the hole in the shutter is small and it's a fairly fast shutter speed, it's going to be pretty dark, and you can see it here. This one has both under and overexposure because you can see it on the histogram. No tonal ranges whatsoever on this one. Everything's dark. You can't make out what this is. It could be a Ferris wheel. It could be some type of apparatus, a plant apparatus, whatever. You can see the light through the windows. To fix this one, bump down the ISO to maybe 100. Shutter speed, you could definitely slow it down. And the f-stop, make it like an F2. It's an F3 instead of an F8. And that should fix it. Shutter speed on this one, 1/100th of a second. F-stop is 2.8. No unknown ISO. And this one has a lot of good shadows, good midtones, but no highlights whatsoever. And the midtones are kind of blah midtones. But again, it's at sunset. To fix this one, to make it a little better in the tonal region, would be actually to bump the ISO up a little bit. And on the shutter speed, make it slower. Make the shutter speed slower, letting more light in. And you could even make the f-stop a little, maybe like an F1 or f-stop 1.5 or something like that. Dynamic range. Dynamic range is range at which the camera can record relative brightness and darkness. The dynamic range of a digital camera are not that big compared to film. So not much really to talk about in dynamic range. It was more in film days. Now we're going to talk about contrast. There's an article by Peter Eisenberger, the Arizona Highway Director of Photography. Great article on a photography talk column where it discusses the awareness of light in relation to the subjects in your photographs. It talks about how light and shadow become integral parts of composition when skillfully incorporated, and should be your first consideration before setting up any type of photograph. When lighting conditions have been evaluated and camera position chosen to take the best advantage of light subject relationship, the next is composition. So we're going to talk about composition here, and he gives some really cool elements to help us in composition. The first is, in your photos, find a strong focal point to take a photo of, which generally you would think would make sense, but when we start taking a photo, sometimes when we're first starting to take a photo, we're wanting to fill everything in. I can't mention that in week one. Fill everything in on the photo that we're taking to where it's totally filled up with stuff. We need to get away from that to where we're just focusing on one focal point of that photo. And it's usually best to have one subject as a focal point because a photograph can tell successfully one story. The main subject can be one or several things. It could be a family. That subject could be a family. It could be a group of people, but it's one entity that you're photoing. And everything else becomes secondary. So on this picture here, the person on the ledge is very small compared to everything else, if you notice. The tree, the ledge, the overexpanse of the valley they're in, the drop of that ledge, but everything else is secondary. But when you first see this image and you're looking at it, your eyes might literally go to the tree first because it's pretty ominous part of the photo. And it's in the upper left corner, which we read left to right in America, so that's pretty normal for us to go there. But then our eyes stop secondly at the person. And we're like, wow, they're right on the ledge there, not too far from the edge. And then we start looking at everything else around that person and start getting a feeling of being there maybe. But generally our first eye stop might not be at that person. It might be at the tree or whatever. Anybody have theirs go to the tree first on this one? Or anybody have yours go maybe to the ledge first and then you saw a person? Some people have that too, where you see the ledge first and you're like, whoa, what's on that ledge? Oh, it's a person. But the person is the main subject here. Everything else is secondary, as the article writer says here. But make sure nothing distracts from the focal point. Lacking a strong center of focus forces a viewer to search for everything else for a resting place. Your eyes naturally want to find a resting place in a picture. And in this case, a resting place finally becomes, it might take a couple looks, is the person on the ledge. You're kind of like, okay, that's what this photo is about. Always give the focal point sufficient space to do that, and that's definitely happening. And this one, as far as placement, will be on the upper right quadrant of that rule of thirds we talked about last week, which we get into next. So rule of thirds is the exact center of any composition. Is not a satisfying place, even though it's human nature to start there. When we're taking photos to fill everything up, put in the center. The main subject should be placed, with the main subject placed in the center, the viewer is less likely to explore the rest of the image, the rest of the photo. We look at if we put everything in the middle will be like, yeah, done. Well, did you notice this over here? No, I didn't notice that. Did you notice this on the left side? No, I didn't notice that. So it's preferable to keep the viewer's eye moving. To create movement, you need to avoid what's called the static bullseye in composition. By using the rule of thirds as a guideline for off-center placement of the main subject, is a traditional way to create a well-balanced composition. And they've been doing it for centuries. Artists have been doing it for centuries, since Michelangelo, on rule of thirds in composition. And so to apply the rule of thirds, imagine the scene of your viewfinder being vertically and horizontally split up, or some of your cameras already have this for you in a grid. So place the main subject and other important elements on one of the composition grid lines or the points where the grid lines intersect. I like to call it the 4 quadrants. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Then employ the rule of thirds. Only helps symmetrically laying things out, but it's more pleasing to the eye. So in this picture here, this over here would be the focal point. Notice on the upper left quadrant, it's not centered right in the middle of the picture. All this other stuff around this is all secondary. Even though it takes up 3/4 of the photo, it's secondary. And that's good because your eyes eventually float towards that area on the upper left corner, and then everything else complements it. The lines and everything complements it as it goes through it. So a common compositional faux pas occurs when the horizon is positioned directly through the middle of the frame, bisecting the scene. Usually in the rule of third, the horizon is placed on one of the grid lines. This will lower or raise the horizon in the frame and give emphasis to a dramatic effect and make it more interesting. So here's an example. Horizon is in the lower quadrant, the lower 1/3, and everything else 2/3. So 1/3, 2/3 is generally the rule of thumb when it comes to photos. You could do it vice versa. You could have 2/3 be the ground and 1/3 be the sky. And the horizon line then would follow the upper part instead of the lower part like it does here. Example here on simplicity, the best way to present a clear message is to keep things compositionally simple. The fewer confusion or fewer elements, he says, to work with, the better. The easier it is to design a pleasing image to control the viewer's eye. There are several ways to simplify composition, but primary method is to move closer to the subject. Says if your pictures aren't good enough, you're not close enough, is a really good quote. If they're not good enough, you're not close enough. So get closer to your subject. Like in this example here, that far, 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 far object mountain at the very back was the subject focal point. But look at all the other junk that's in there in between. Hard to see, hard to note. It's kind of confusing. So maybe get a little closer. Getting closer, what it does is removes visual distractions from the edges of the frame, eliminates superfluous elements, and defocuses the background. Shadow depth of field helps to isolate the subject from the busy background by blurring the objectionable clutter, and even creates soft pools of color behind the subject. So here we have an example of that. And so you got basically, again, the horizon line is on the upper part here, 1/3, 2/3 is ground, 1/3 is sky. Focal point is that horizon with those mountainous regions, but not a lot of distraction. In fact, even the lines of the sand point you to the focal point, which is the mountains in the far end. And so, again, just training our eye to see that, training our eye to start seeing that and start viewing that when we're taking photos is helpful. And that's what's called leading lines. Leading lines is where compositionally you create energy in the photo itself, whether it be lines of buildings, roads, railways, whatever, to where you're gracefully leading the viewer's eyes to the focal point with the lines within the photo. And be careful though, it says using leading lines. It can also work against you by directing the eye away from the subject if a line divides it into two out of the image. So a couple factors on composition he ends with is let the lines in your composition decide if the scene should be shot horizontally or vertically. An example would be a building, a tall building. If you're taking a photo, normally you might be taking photos horizontally, landscape kind of. The building, you have to take it vertically to where you get the whole building to take that photo a little different. A group of people, since they're elongated in a group shot, would be naturally taken in what? Landscape or portrait, you think? Landscape or portrait? What do you think? So it'd be taken like this with your camera or this? Yeah, like this. So portrait. So your lines of the group dictate that. Lines of the building dictates that. Be aware of the white or light areas in your composition. The viewer's eyes will always go to the brightest part of the scene. Eliminate anything very bright. And a lot of times the trick on that is just moving your camera to where those bright parts are out of the scene. Moving a little bit, positioning a little bit differently to where the bright parts are out of the scene. An example would be if you have sun over here, the sun, brightness of the sun over here, and it's creeping into your scene, move the camera a little bit to where the brightness is away from it a little bit. Look for repetition of shapes and textures. Patterns that create motion, natural motion. Compose boldly using sweeping diagonal lines. Long horizontal lines can be static and visual boring. Conversely, diagonal lines will help. Like a picture of the building I talked about earlier. Remember I talked about taking the camera and doing a vertical thing? Take the camera and just pivot it a little bit, back it up a little bit to where when the end result of the picture is a building looks like it's kind of tilted a little bit, but those lines will actually make a person more interested in your photos. Just a little tilting of the line will make things more interesting in a photo. Because our eyes, human nature, expect things to be, if we see a photo as we see it when we're walking down the street, it doesn't catch our eye. If we see a photo taken from a different perspective, that catches our eye, right? Whether it be a building taken from a helicopter view down to the building, that's kind of cool. Don't normally see that. Or let's say if a photographer literally gets on the ground, which I've done this before, and take a photo of a building on the ground going straight up. You know, you don't usually see that. So perspective is big when it comes to catching a person's eye with the subject that you're wanting. Try using wide angle lens, which in this class you don't need to worry about that. But you do have, most of you have settings in your camera, which we'll talk about this semester, where you can do landscape settings and play with your settings to where it'll set it in like landscape mode for landscape portraits. So obviously he's only scratching the surface here, but he mentions here in the last paragraph about this term visual harmony. What that means is every photographer, including myself and you're gonna have a different definition of visual harmony. And what that means is when you look at a photo, has anybody seen a photo and immediately you've been disturbed by that photo? Like it's literally made you cry just by looking at it. Another person could look at a photo, that very same photo, and be like, eh, right? Maybe your friend or family look at it and you're like, wow, look at this photo. What do you think? And they're like, yeah, it's a nice photo, but no, did you see, it just doesn't get them like it does you. That is fine. That's going to happen. The one thing that though can be the same though for all photos that everybody can appreciate is what you learned this semester, which is how to place the subjects in your photo, whether it be people, objects, animals, cars, buildings, whatever. Compositionally place them in your photos to where they're pleasing to the eye. It leads everybody's eyes to that place, to that object, to that subject, and it makes them wanting more. That's another last thing I'll mention is a good photo, which he doesn't mention in the article here, is it makes you want more or fill in more of what the photo doesn't show you. An example would be if we went up here to this one here, like what's beyond your eyes or your mind generally will say what's beyond that area of mountains there. What is beyond the area of rocks that are in the far end? What's beyond that? Your mind thinks that. Or what's to the left of the scene over here? What's to the right of the scene? What's behind? All those things lead your eyes to want more. You definitely see the subject. You know what the subject is. And you're great with that. But you also are kind of wanting more, which is a good thing. You don't want a picture to totally fulfill everything about that subject. You want it to want more. And if you've seen a good commercial or movie ad, they generally give you just enough to wonder what's next. That's why you go buy the ticket to buy the movie, right? Now, sometimes, sad to say, the trailers are the best part of the movie, but hopefully not. Hopefully it's just a teaser into what, a snippet into what you're going to see, and you're going to see more, or cliffhangers. They do this on shows where at the end of the show, somebody's getting ready to die, a star character, right? And you're like, oh, I got to wait another 6 weeks to watch this and see what's going to happen, right? It leaves you hanging, right? Same thing with billboards. You might have seen some billboards as you drive by. One of the coolest ones I saw a while back was it was a little different. It was a billboard of a football player, and the football went beyond the limits of the billboard. So here's the top of the billboard. The hand of the football player was up like this, and the football was in the hand. It really caught your eye because it was out of the normal structure and guidelines of a billboard. And it, kind of really caught your eye, made you, wonder, if he was to throw that football, where would it go in that area that the billboard was at? So your mind does weird things. Some of us, our minds does weirder things than others when we look at photos, but all of us fill in things to a certain extent, and we all of us go to certain spots on a photo immediately, and the good photographer will have 1 or 2 or 3 spots for people to go to, and that's about it. And it hopefully land on that focal point that you've got. It doesn't always have to be the biggest thing on the photo, but everything else complements it to where the person's like their eyes finally rest on that subject, whether it be like the lady on the cliff earlier, the mountain region, the boat, whatever it might be, the family, the smiles of people that tells a story, whatever it might be. So good composition we talked about tonight is exposure, contrast, rule of thirds. Now let's talk about your homework for this week. You're going to be using in your camera this semester some settings. Some of these settings, if you're in class exercise, we're going to do this before you leave, and I'll turn the lights on. The list on the overhead is some of the listings of some of your settings that some of your cameras will have. Some of your cameras will have all of them, some of them. What I want you to do now is get your camera out, and you're going to submit in here whatever overriding settings your camera has. Like this has an example of auto, aperture mode, ISO mode, movie mode, close-up mode, sports, PAM, TV, whatever acronym your camera has, whether it be digital, your digital camera or your phone. Just go and put those list of 1 to 10 on there real quick, and then submit it. Take a moment to do that. And you don't have to, if it's an acronym like P, just put P in there. You don't have to explain what that is. That's fine. And then once you submit that, we're going to go over your homework and your take home in just a second. Do I know? Auto, yep. Yeah, if you have other settings at the bottom, though, a lot of them will have like exposure. At the bottom of the iPhone app, will have like, 4 or 5 different settings. Besides auto, might be like exposure. I'm trying to think what else. Auto settings, but whatever they have there at the bottom, it might be only 4 or 5 maybe, possibly. So whatever you have, just put that there. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep. All right, how am I still working on your settings? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and go to the take home. You're gonna be building on what we talked about tonight. Um, you'll create a week 3 photo album in your Foki account. And I want you to walk around campus and other places and take 3 photos or 3 pictures of using each of the below settings that give itself to good contrast. So after transferring the photos to your computer, you'll upload them and label them Nature 1, Nature 2, Nature 3, People 1, etc. You'll see in a second more. You'll upload them to week 3, and we'll go over in class next week. You'll caption each photo with the label below that we'll look at. So you're going to focus this week on ISO and white balance and use only the auto and presets. Don't use a manual white balance yet. We will be going into that this semester. Yeah. Do I know? Yeah, you can definitely take it RC. There's other places though, but you can definitely take it if you want to. Yep, and we'll talk about locations here in a second. So ISO and white balance, auto and presets. So an example you're going to use ISO for 3 ranges in a row. An example would be, let's say your camera ISO starts out on the low range of 100. So your first will be 100, and we'll say the next is 200, next is 300. Those are the 3 you're going to use for every photo you take. So you might have 100, 300, 500, or 800, 100, 200. Just start with the lowest ISO and then go to the next 2. So here's what you're going to do. You'll find a nature setting, regardless of where it's at, doesn't matter. If a nature setting you like, you'll describe the settings on your camera that to make a good contrast better, like what white balance is that you have set, what ISO you have set, and choose the best contrast. So an example is this. The gazebo out here by the student center. Let's use as an example, the little gazebo over there. We'll say it's 2 o'clock tomorrow in the afternoon, and you go by there with your camera and you take a photo at 200 ISO, and you use a white balance setting on your camera called sunny white balance. Then 300 ISO, shade white balance. Then 400 ISO, auto white balance. After looking at all 3 of them, you label best on one of them when you upload it, what you think's the best. Okay, it's subjective, totally subjective, but that's how you would label it. So be nature 1, 2, and 3 with what ISO setting it was and white balance it was. Okay. People gathering. So you go to Cherryville Mall, you take some photos and say, take some photos maybe at work or something or at home, doesn't matter. And you have 3 people photos you're going to take. And it's of the same people, the same group, same with the nature, by the way, the gazebo. So it's the same photo 3 times. All you're changing is settings. 200 ISO sunny white balance, 300 ISO shade white balance, and 400 ISO auto white balance. And then you decide end result after you look at them at home and upload them, what the best one is, and put best in parentheses. Number 3, vehicles. Your location describing an area that you're at. You'll say maybe the WTC parking lot. Vehicles 1, 2, and 3. Same thing like we did before, except on this one you find out the 200 ISO is best in this one. But you'll notice each one of these, you're using the same exact ISO in conjunction with the same white balance each time. Okay? So 200 is always sunny, 300 is always shade, 400 is always auto white balance every time. So if your camera starts out, say your range is 100, 200, 300 ISO, that's what you would do up here. You would do 100, 200, 300 on every one of the settings. The nature, the people gathered in the vehicles would all be 100, 200, 300, sunny, shade, and auto each time. Make sense? So it's going to be the same settings each time of your camera, taking that photo 3 separate times, not moving your camera as best you can to make sure the lighting is not going to be any different. Other locations is the last one, and you choose wherever you want to on that one. It could be wherever you want it to be. And this I gave a mall food court, and so you're with your friends, you're around a table or whatever, and you do the same deal with the mall. Your 3 levels of ISO. The first level has to be auto. Second level on this one, though, you're going to do auto white balance as well, and 400 auto white balance. So on the last one for other, you're doing auto white balance on all 3. So it's different than the first 3. And I'm doing that on purpose. So you can see on this one really how much ISO really makes a difference on the last one. So the last one, you'll be able to see really what ISO does. The first 3, you'll kind of get a feel for both ISO and white balance, both what they do in conjunction. They do weird things, by the way, when you change white balance on your settings. So once you're finished with all 4, you'll label them, upload them, again, put parentheses around the one that's best, and then submit it. Below, I have all this stuff of what you need to submit. Really, all you need, this is just giving you what the labels could look like on your album. All you need to submit to me is a link to that album at the bottom. That's it. Just a text entry of the link to your album. Like here's an example here of a link to an album for week 3. That's all I need would be like a link like this, and that's it. Because I can look at your labels myself. Okay, so this was a breakdown here of what it could look like on your website on Foki. So when I look at your labels on Foki, I'm going to see something like this. You'll have a nature of the same photo, 3 times, different settings, people and vehicles. On these 3, nature, people, and vehicles, each ISO is the same white balance on every one of them. So what I mean by that is if you have a 200, 300, 400 succession, 200 is always going to be sunny white balance, 300 is always going to be shade white balance, and 400 is always going to be auto white balance. Make sense? For the nature, people, and vehicles. The last one, the other, it's always going to be auto, but again, 3 ISOs in the same succession. So with this exercise, you'll get to see what ISO does differently with all your photos. You'll also get to see what white balance does differently with all your photos, because it can do some pretty cool stuff depending on your lighting. It can do some artistic things and make things look better, make them look worse. But I'm guessing most of you haven't played with both of them together. So this is a good exercise to get you to play with both ISO and white balance, what it does, as well as getting an eye anyway for what you think subjectively is good exposure. What's the best lighting of the photo, what we talked about tonight, as far as the lighting of the photo, make sure it's well adjusted and you can see everything well, not too overexposed or underexposed, but just right. So any questions on that one? Let me go around real quick. I want to see that you know before we leave tonight if you have where your ISO setting is on your camera and your white balance. Both white balance and ISO is what I need to see. So get your camera, I'll give you a moment to look at that to see if you can find it, and I will help you find it if you can't as I come around. So that way you kind of know what you're doing when you're going out and about this week and playing with it. Is anybody ready on this row for me to look at theirs? Okay, cool. Yep. And you'll do what? The 120 start with your low end 125 on yours? Yeah. Okay, cool. 125, 200, 400. Yeah, you'll do those 3. Yep. And yep. And you're going to have all the different, you have what, presets, I'm guessing, on yours? Or you have one manual, and what else you got? Hit cancel. Just hit the OK button. Go back, hit your menu button for me. There you go. If you go down to, click on white balance again, and scroll down. Oh, there you have daylight, incandescent, and fluorescent. So for yours, for sunny, on your white balance, let's use daylight for sunny. Shade, we'll do cloudy, and then auto's auto. Make sense?
Yep.
So as I come around, I'm also going to help you guys figure out what the white balance is on your camera. Okay, so let's go to go on auto mode right now. Let's go to menu. Here. Switching from auto to programs. Function 2. Use flash functions. There we go. So what I did is I hit function set, and over to the left I've got ISO.
Oh, I see.
Okay,
Oh, I
ISO.
see. Yeah.
There's the ISO, and then your auto white balance is right there.
Oh,
And auto for you, you're going to do, let's see, for sunny, you'll do daylight. Cloudy is going to be your shade, and then auto's auto.
okay. Good stuff.
Yes. So, we'll do 3 of these. We'll click this, and we'll do on yours, let's see, mono, tonal, and noir. Those 3. That's what you'll do. And so instead of everything I showed you here, on yours, you're just going to do mono, tonal, and noir. Which one say? Success. Cool. Awesome. And you have put up the white balance with the ISO, right? Okay. And then you have white balance, you can put it up here this one. If you don't know where that. Okay. Just do this. Okay. Cool. And you know the ranges. Yours are what? Okay. So you'll start out with what's going on, 200. Yeah, so you'll do 200, 400, 600, like this. And then let's go to your white balance just to make sure that you have, what do you have stuff? Okay, so daylight is sunny for you on the other end. Sunny's daylight. Shade, you have a shade one. That's going to be shade. And then auto's auto. Makes sense? Cool. Yep. Four photos you're taking. Each photo session you're taking 3 times. Those 3 different ISOs. Okay, what do you guys have? iPhone or yours? Okay, on iPhone, what app are you using? Okay, okay, they have both. They have ISO and
Yeah.
white balance. Yep. Cool. And let me look at your white balance on that one. What options do you have on that? Okay, so let's do this. We'll play with that real quick. Let's do, let's give a number. The Kelvin temperature?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do this. Let's do 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 Kelvin on the AWB white balance. And then you know what the ISOs are. whatever the low end ISO is for that, whatever the low one is. Yeah, so let's start out 100. We'll do 100, we'll do 100, 200, 300 on ISO. And on the Kelvin, let's say on that, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, you guys do that. Same for yours. Sound good? All right. Okay, so you're gonna do 80, 100, 80, 100, and what? Yeah, 800, 200 for ISO, and then we see the white balance. White balance, okay, daylight's gonna be what I have for sunny is gonna be your daylight. And then shade is cloudy on yours, and then auto's auto. Make sense? Yeah?
Yep.
Did I get you?
Nope, you done.
Okay,
Alright, so I found,
gotcha. And then you got, and then auto white balance. Okay. And that's daylight. For daylight is sunny on the one I have. So sunny is daylight on yours.
okay,
And then for, do you have a cloudy one?
I do have a
That'll be shade. And
okay,
then auto's auto.
okay.
Make
And
sense?
then what ISOs do you want me to use? Will we use
ISO, what's the ranges on your ISO?
one,
Let's start out
two,
100. Start at 100 and then go 200. Looks like 100, 200, 400 looks like. Can you go to 300 on the ISO?
No, can't.
100, 200, 400? Do that. Sounds good?
That works for me.
Okay, so we want to go to the, you can go to the auto mode on your camera. You should be able to access all of this. And then you want to hit the menu for your ISO. It's going to be on the your menu up here somewhere. Let me turn on the light here for you so I can see that. All right. Do you mind if I look at your camera real quick? And I'll show you where it's at. Okay. So I've got it on auto mode. Okay, so let's go to menu. Okay, so instead of on yours, instead of your auto mode, go to P mode, your program mode. Okay, on the program mode, this button here, ISO button, pop up. When you hit the ISO button, it'll pop up. And right now you've got a choice of use your wheel, and you're going to go 100, 200, 400 for ISO. Okay, so like I'm going 100, 400. And the last one, the last one is going to be auto white. And then to get to the white balance, WB on program mode. And let's see. Daylight is going to be sunny. You might jot that down. So sunny is going to be daylight. Shade is shade. And auto low. It's only different name-wise on why I have sunny. And then once you select one of these on your camera, you're just going to hit set for that. And the same with ISO. Once you get this ISO what you want, so you do 200, then you set. now set ISO 200 with an all white balance. Make sense? All right, good to go. Thank you. Yeah. Yes, sir. All right, so on yours, you have a P mode on yours? Yeah, I would set the, let's do the P mode. And you should have, let me see, do you have an ISO button there? Yes, you do. On that. And then use your wheel, the top here, you should have a wheel. You can adjust it. So you're going to do 100, 200, 400. When you select the ISO you need, you'll click the, this button here to set it. To get the WB, you should have a WB button somewhere in your wheel. It's generally here. See a WB? It's down here. It's good menu. Yeah. Okay. All right, so what you're gonna do on yours, okay, day, like on the overhead, I have sunny, yours gonna be daylight. Daylight's gonna be sunny, shade to shade, and all of that. Okay. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right, sir. Great to go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
So for the internships, I work for Chicago Bulls.
Okay.
And I would like to go like up into their tech area.
Sure.
Who would I ask and what would I like, do you know what I would be doing? Like what different things? Like would it be more graphics?
And
Like
which company was it you were interested in?
the Chicago Bulls.
Oh,
So I
Chicago
work for
Bulls,
the United
okay.
Center.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I would say, do you know if they had any positions open now, or you don't know?
I don't, but I can always go talk to someone.
I would just tell them you're going to college for, computer science related type of degree, and you'd like to be an intern, and you'll do whatever it is you want to do. Because it's generally a grunt job.
Right,
You generally do
right.
whatever, which, you'll do whatever tech thing they need you to do.
Okay,
And for them, it could be as simple as, installing programs to printers to stuff like that. General help desk type stuff, which you probably already do
Yeah.
already on your own stuff.
Yeah.
So that's what I would do. And then if you need a reference, like from a faculty, let me know. I'll write you a letter of reference.
Okay.
Because sometimes we need that.
Okay.
And then if you get that, we can actually apply for your internship credit, which if you work $75 in a semester, full credit.
okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sound
'cause
good.
I'm gonna talk to someone about it sometime this week, the next time I'm in there,
That'd be great.
and see what
Yeah.
who they tell me to talk to.
Sure. Well, if you need help, let me know.
Okay, thank you very
Yeah,
much.
you're welcome.